words, and then I'll go ahead and do an introduction.
I would just obviously thank everyone for coming here tonight. This is not an official meeting. There will be no final action taken. This is purely informational. It's going to be recorded. Yes. And it will be recorded and available on our website generally.
It is being broadcast on Channel 22 Comcast, as well as our YouTube channel. I became aware right before this meeting, there was a power outage downtown this afternoon. I-3, from my understanding, is still not up and running. Those customers who utilize I-3 TV will not be able to see this, but it will be recorded and it will be posted to the website for them to watch it later. Okay. Just real quickly, my name's John Dawsey. I'm the city manager for the city of Pekin. To my right is Joshua Ray. He's the Economic Development Director. Attorney Jim Vaselli. To my immediate left is Eric Dubrowski. He's the Finance Director. And then Bob Grogan, who is the financial consultant for the city of Pekin. This is our executive team, and we have been meeting and talking quite a bit. We're well aware that there's some dialogue in the community about home rule. We have been paying attention to some of that and some of the questions that have been asked of us, as well as what we have seen through some of the social media that's been passed around, that it's clear that a lot of people don't understand home rule and what it does and doesn't do for the city of Pekin. And the purpose of this meeting tonight is one of many town halls that we plan to hold in the upcoming weeks and months to talk about town hall and talk about other things about how Pekin's operating, and just get some input from the community on what we can do better and get some dialogue started on that. And with that, we're just going to jump right into the home rule. We'll do a short presentation, and then we will take some questions. The one thing I would ask is, if you happen to ask a question that we don't immediately know the answer to, there is a notepad there. We would ask that you write your name, your phone number, and an email address so that we can definitely communicate that with you. And obviously, we'll post that information so the general public can hear that. And also, we kind of want to try to give everybody an opportunity. There's not a lot here, so we'll probably be a little bit flexible on time with speaking, but we're going to try to answer everybody's questions and be as clear as possible on what home rule is and what it isn't, and go from there. I will go ahead and jump in. I think Mr. Vaselli is going to cover the first slide. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure. So what is home rule? So home rule is derives from a case called Dillon's. It derives from a ruling from an Illinois or an Iowa Supreme Court case where Judge Dillon talked about the necessary controls for municipalities. So it essentially comes down to local control versus state of Illinois control, and it has general powers versus powers only allowed by the state. So just breaking that down a little bit, when you have home rule, you need not go to Springfield for every action that you take. So you have autonomy to make your own decisions rather than always finding some form of control or allowances that come from the Illinois Municipal Code. So the authority derives from the Illinois Constitution in 1970. It is literally in the verbiage of the Constitution about home rule. If you hit 25,000 people or you have a referendum, you can become a home rule unit. And you can, if you go beneath 25,000 people, or you have to have a referendum to ensure that you keep home rule status, or you can relinquish home rule powers, which does not happen that often, through a referendum process. You want to do it?
I can do that. So in 1970, when around 1970, when Pekin hit 25,000 in population, we automatically became a home rule municipality. In 1987, This was brought to referendum to remove home rule, and it failed by a 2-to-1 margin at that time, and the people or the community chose to retain home rule. So,
Yeah, so next we're going to get into some topics here about if home rule is removed, what does that mean? Basically, what kind of changes if you don't have home rule status? So this is the list of topics we're going to cover, starting with development and land use regulations. If you want to hit the next slide, John. So one of the biggest things is restriction on real estate transactions. The state law specifies certain things like you have to get an appraisal and you have to get at least 80% of that appraised value. Now there's other cases in which you don't have to do that, but the general rule is that you have to go through that whole process, which costs money, takes time, and ultimately it might not be the best decision to require that much if there's some kind of greater benefit. For example, when the city did the real estate transaction with Epic Medical earlier this year, the appraisal for that property from a couple years prior was significantly higher than what the city sold it for, but it was part of the sale package, meaning instead of providing, tax incentives or things like that, we were able to sell the property for a lower amount and then retain all those taxes. So again, home rule allowed for the flexibility to make that economic development deal work for Pekin. Another thing is that it does require, state mandated zoning processes. So as a home rule community, you can set what kind of notice periods you want, what kind of notice requirements you want, combine your planning and zoning plan commission and zoning board of appeals. In the city of Pekin, the zoning board is also the groundwater appeals committee and those types of things. So you can gain efficiencies as a home rule unit and not have to go through all those state mandated things that, are frankly written in 1970 or may not be applicable. There's a lot of places that don't have a newspaper in general circulation anymore. So that posting requirement is looking at being changed at the state level, but hasn't yet. Some of the things that don't change when you're talking about economic development or real estate or land use, TIF districts have nothing to do with home rule. The last community that I worked in was non-home rule. It was 7,000-8,000 people. They had a TIF district. They utilized it. Does not take any home rule authority to do so. The enterprise zone that's here, it's kind of a lesser known thing, but Pekin participates in what's called an enterprise zone that also provides some economic incentives with the county and some of the other municipalities. Home rule is not involved with that. Building codes have nothing to do with home rule. The state does now mandate some minimum building code requirements. It's the Illinois State Plumbing Code's been around for a while. The Illinois Energy Conservation Code's been around for a while. And now they're starting to mandate more codes. But if you're a non-home rule unit, you still have building codes, you still have a property maintenance code, and those things still get enforced. And along those lines, there's still permitting processes, there's still building inspections. None of that has anything to do with home rule. No, go ahead. You're up next.
I'm sorry, turn my mic back on. In regards to law enforcement, I think there's some significant things that could change in here losing home rule. One is we had numerous complaints along the riverfront with the homeless encampments. And our biggest struggle from the law enforcement world, and of course I was the prior police chief, the biggest struggle we had is the state of Illinois laws are they have the Homeless Bill of Rights. So the homeless actually had rights to be on public property. Camping was allowed. And, I had numerous conversations with probably every one of the council members, 2 councils now, that, why can't we take their property? Why can't we clean it up? Why can't we let them go? Well, the laws of the state of Illinois give them property rights, so we could not go in and forcibly remove. We couldn't even go up and necessarily have conversation with the unhoused unless there was a criminal activity or something going on that gave us the right to go up and talk to them. We were able to enact the no camping ordinance once the Supreme Court made a ruling on that. And what we do is a little bit different is we still take into consideration the Homeless Bill of Rights, but we now have the opportunity to actually have contact. So we put some processes in place through the use of a social worker. We've partnered up with the Salvation Army, the Pekin Outreach Initiative. And we've actually been able to house some of these people, and we've also been able to work and clean up many of those encampments. There's a process in place. Yes, there are still some tents and things, but it is significantly better than what it was. But it's going to be a continual working process until we can resolve homelessness in general, and that's going to be some time, and there's going to have to be a lot of work at the federal and the state levels to be able to accomplish this. Another example would be everybody calls them the DUI bikes. They're the gas-powered bikes. Everybody was complaining about them. It necessarily wasn't an issue in Morton or East Peoria or Peoria for that matter, but it was a problem here, and we were able to implement an ordinance that in essence banned the gas-powered motor bikes, and it's been significantly better, I hear on occasion, but I know that they have taken enforcement action. And there's likely several others as we go through the code. I know the state of Illinois has some other laws they've passed. I know a few years back we had to go change a couple of the ordinances as they apply to police enforcement. But I'm sure as we go through, we'll discover several others that are going to be a problem. What does not change is code enforcement. And I will say we received 2 questions from the public through email, and we'll cover those tonight. One of them pertains to code enforcement, and some of the conversations I've seen taking place on social media are, they think, a lot of people seem to think getting rid of home rule gets rid of code enforcement. It's going to still be there. I think Councilman Phillips said it best a couple meetings ago. If the ordinance is the issue, let's address the ordinance and let's go in and look at the ordinance and see if we can fix that. But getting rid of home rule is not going to be the answer. So that would be what we need to do as far as code enforcement goes. The body camera law is still going to be in place. The Safety Act, that's really changed a lot of things in the law enforcement realm. And the CJIS requirements that they still face, they still have to go through all that. That will not change. So now we go to the city finances.
So what does this mean for city finances? Having worked in both home rule and non-home rule communities, I'm very well aware of a lot of the tools and options at your disposal here. Taking a look at our numbers on the revenues that we receive directly related to home rule, it's about $8 million per year. It's roughly 20% of our annually recurring general fund revenue, which comes from these sources. So they include things like our local sales taxes. There's a portion of that that's related to home rule. Some local motor fuel packaged liquor, and some hotel motel. Something to note with a lot of this is often paid for, not 100% tied to individuals living in the community. A lot of this is shared with people that are from outside the community. These dollars, since they're in the general fund, most of them, provide a lot of the everyday services that you see. It's the fire and police protection, it's the snow removal, it's the streets, things of that nature. Again, as I said, home rule provides more tools to fund and sustain those operations locally. So without it, the cities that don't have those options often rely more heavily on property taxes to sustain those operations. Our property taxes, a lot of that's going to fuel into our public pensions. This, you see a lot of that tapping into those operational pieces, which in this situation becomes state capped under PTEL, which is the lesser of 5% or CPI. When inflation exceeds 5%, the costs rise faster than revenues can recover. Without home rule, those revenues disappear, and they disappear immediately. There's no gradual phase-in that takes place, that over a certain period of year for you to absorb and make plans. In those situations, cities often will dip into their reserves, make kind of hasty cuts, And then some may even borrow for operations in that short term in order to, cover expenses, cover payroll, which becomes difficult in obtaining those dollars. Debt flexibility starts to become limited. Caps, they hinder the city's ability to respond to emergencies. A water main break, storm recovery, things of that nature. As we talk about our debt, there's a debt margin, debt limit that's imposed. Our debt margin overall as a city, the city, one thing that we're fortunate with is comparatively, we have pretty low debt overall to a lot of communities our size, which is a good thing. So those are the things that will change. What won't change are the things on the right side of the slide. So we talk about utility taxes and sewer and garbage fees, the grocery tax, purchasing thresholds, funding of the pensions, how they're funded, audit requirements, the budget process. That is not impacted by home rule or non-home rule. It's mostly the items on the left. So last Monday, the next couple slides came directly from that. As we talk about property tax rates, over the last 14 years, the city's property tax rate declined about 9%. When you combine that with the city and the library together, because the library is a component of us as an entity, it's less than a 0.5% increase in total over that span of time. Meanwhile, the costs for fuel, asphalt, insurance, and equipment, they continue to rise, and they rise sharply. I guess the takeaway from that is that home rule helps stabilize property tax rates during that period of time. It doesn't necessarily directly inflate them. It allows the city to hold taxes steady while maintaining those core services that we discussed.
So Eric, just to throw out there, because some of the dialogue that we've heard is that our taxes are out of control because of home rule. Is this saying that it is not the case? The dialogue out there is that our taxes are inflated or high because of we're a home rule status. That's the conversation, some of the conversation that's taking place out there.
I mean, not directly because of home rule. I mean, yeah, for the levy.
For the levy.
Fees, right.
But we're showing that we're not abusing home rule status for the levy. Would that be
Correct. I mean, that's,
correct? Okay.
yeah. So speaking of the levy overall, again, the levy, the rate, the EAV, how they all factor together. Inflation spiked, as you all know, after 2020. EAV followed as housing values climbed in conjunction with that. The city's levy itself, to John's point, it increased, but increased modestly, and it's not directly tied to home rule. Yet the tax rate still declined. The result is revenue growth lags, and it lags significantly behind CPI and EAV. And that's where you're seeing those sharper increases related to the CPI, into the inflation, into the levy, even though the rate's dropping. So the city's buying power keeps shrinking even when the levy increases slightly. Home rule enables local adjustments, not to raise taxes unnecessarily, but to keep pace with those real cost pressures that we see that, Springfield's limits ignore. And a lot, speaking of Springfield, as we look back to this, over this period of time, we've seen significant cuts with state shared revenues, with local government distributive fund, with income tax, with all that type of stuff. The cuts to the cities have been decreasing, which is another thing to keep in mind. It shifts more to the local communities. So, as we talked about, $8 million. That's $8 million in annually recurring revenue. It's not abstract. It's real and it's immediate. And when you're in those type of situations, you have options. And one is on the expense side. If you were to make a cut of that size, again, you can't do a one-time cut for something like that. Really, to put that in an equation, it's like cutting half of the police and the fire personnel. I mean, it's really to make a significant net. That's what we're talking about here. Which, of course, something like that with public safety, you get slower response times for 911 calls, there's fewer patrols, delayed services. Other option, okay, so we'll look at the revenues, and this often does happen in those kind of communities. So if it fell to the property taxes, then that's when you're going to see a significant increase in your property tax rates. To recoup $8 million, it's more or less 160% increase on the tax rates, which again goes counter to the point of trying to keep the property taxes in check, which again, what's the lesser of two evils in those situations? Things that don't help, or deferring capital. Let's push something back a few years. Well, that just kicks the can down the road. Cutting pension benefits set by state law. Some of our road projects, they're funded by other sources, such as TIF and what have you. Cuts to sewer, garbage, bus departments, separate funds, outside the general fund. Cuts to the airport, federal government won't allow it. So there's a lot of restrictions that we come across. And I'm not saying this to alarm anybody, that's not the point. It's just to show the scale and the magnitude of what $8 million would mean to a community of this size.
Yeah, this is just another list of some of the things that are not necessarily affected by home rule. People are just not aware of what is and what is not sometimes. Council meeting rules and the speaking time that's set by council. Every community, regardless of size and status, can set those rules. Every community is allowed to have executive sessions or closed sessions. We also have to follow the Open Meetings Act equally. The Freedom of Information Act has to be followed equally. All communities can set rules for how the public accesses city-owned property. The city manager form of government is totally independent of home rule. That's a separate referendum, a whole separate question. Election laws all have to be followed the same way, whether you're home rule or not. And just because it was on a council meeting agenda recently, you don't have to have home rule status to do things like marketing and branding and those types of things.
So the big question is, who do you as a community want making decisions for Pekin? Home rule status puts it in a local control, which is your city council members. You have direct access to them. I know that, I do pay attention to the social media stuff, and I know that one of the vocal people said that it's easier to control the local politicians. That's true, because you can call them anytime. You can come in at any council meeting. You can have a conversation with them. You can be heard that way. You can email them. You can talk to them. When you do it with your elected officials in Springfield, they're a little bit harder to access. So that's the question that the community's faced with. Do you want it in your local control, or do you want Springfield or Chicago to be the one that rules what Pekin does? Before I go into a little bit on this, one thing I did want to bring up was in law enforcement, the crime-free housing, that would probably go away.
Crime-free housing would be eliminated you cannot put crime-free housing regulations in non-home rule units. So essentially that is a public safety measure. It allows for us to go to pursue remedies and rights against properties that we know are havens for criminals, basically. That would go away for home rule. So you're essentially weakening the strength of a police department and our policing powers. Can I talk about? Yeah, go ahead. Okay. One other thing I'd like to talk about. You could dismiss everything we're saying up here, but I'm going to reference a 2003 Illinois Municipal League. For anybody who follows local governments, the Illinois Municipal League, it's a group that does studies on governments. They are nonpartisan. They are not controlled by the city. They have offices throughout the whole state, and they are basically like the think tank for governments, local governments. And I'm going to read some excerpts from this, from a 2003 April study on this. A study of 134 home rule and 104 comparable non-home rule Communities recently published in the Journal of Public Economics reported that property tax rates levied by non-home rule communities prior to the adoption of tax caps rose 61% faster than rates levied in the home rule communities. A completed survey of Illinois home rule communities found that home rule communities are less dependent on property taxes for their revenues. On average, according to annual surveys published by the Office of the State Comptroller, cities and villages derive 25 to 30% of their revenues from property taxes. The 2002 study of home rule communities found that home rule communities derive 10 to 20% of their revenue from property taxes. So essentially, what that says to us is you can take the burden off of the residential taxpayer, the homeowner, through other revenue sources if we remain home rule. So if you want to lower the tax burden, keep a lower tax burden for property owners, for homeowners, one way to do it is to use other revenue streams that we can get through our home rule status. That's just plain facts. And I'm going to read the findings, 2 more findings. In short, there is no economic data that supports the contention that property taxes necessarily or even usually increase faster in home rule communities than in non-home rule communities. And then there's 2 more things. Out of the 3 of the 83% of the time when these home rule unit referendum recalls go up, they reject the rejection of home rule, so they stay home rule. In 3 of the 4 communities that did reject home rule, Lombard, Villa Park, the voters in those communities voted home rule out, but their property taxes did not go down. So they voted home rule out and their property taxes did not go down. In Rockford, this is an even more telling situation. They did vote home rule out, and then they had 7 of 9 years of referendums to raise their property taxes higher and higher and higher. The reason I say this is just to educate everyone about, again, April 2003, Illinois Municipal Review, page 15. I'm reading directly from it. But it has the information that the additional streams of revenue that home rule units can use can take the burden off of the homeowner taxpayer. That's just a fact.
Home rule spreads out the tax base with some of the taxes that you're allowed through home rule, the hotel motel, the motor fuel tax, those things. Those are people that don't live in Pekin that come through and visit and spend money, and the home rule tax that we have through sales. Those are people that are coming from outside traveling, and I'll use our attorney when he's here and he spends the night. He's paying into that. So in essence, he's paying a tax to be in Pekin on that. So that helps reduce the burden on the property tax and the tax levy moving down the road. So
Yeah, just to give you another figure on that, the city council approved an engagement with an organization called Retail Strategies a few months back, and they do a lot of hard economic data on things in order to try to attract new businesses. One of the things that they noted is that between our Walmart and our Menards, the retail customer shed for the city of Pekin is 70,000 people. Now, granted, you don't know, which of those people come into Pekin once a year to Walmart or, every week. But the point is there's, 10,000 homes in Pekin that, and local businesses that can have property tax. And then there's 70,000 people that pay into the sales tax. So if you take the amount being paid by 70,000 people and then put it onto just property taxes, that's where you see there's like a 160% increase that would be theoretically be required in order to make that up.
I'm going to move ahead. Like I said before, we had a couple questions. One is in regards to the Constitution, Article 7. A home rule unit shall have only the power that the General Assembly may provide by law, 1, to punish by imprisonment for more than 6 months, or 2, to license for revenue or impose taxes upon or measured by income or earnings or upon occupations. The question is, can the city of Pekin really execute item 1 and imprison members of the community for up to 6 months? The state of Illinois has passed the Safety Act, which is essentially the no cash bail. What would a citizen have to do for the city to jail them for up to 6 months that is outside that of state law? And then if residents don't pay their fines, are they going to jail? So go ahead, Josh, you did a little more research on the
Yeah,
answer on
Mr.
this.
Maselli's got the law degree, so he can correct me if I say something wrong here, but, basically, yes, that's in the Constitution, but the Illinois courts have consistently held that even though the Constitution seems to imply we could jail somebody for up to 6 months, that's not actually true, because we, as a home rule unit and any other home rule unit, are limited to regulating the issues pertaining to our government and affairs. And that has been consistently interpreted to mean the powers that are related to the city's own problems. And the state of Illinois in People v. Valentine back in 1977, it was ruled that criminal offenses are not a municipality-specific area to govern. It's a statewide area to govern. There's a state criminal code that governs it. There's there's proceedings related to criminal court that have to be followed. And therefore, home rule authority does not give any power to jail. Furthermore, it would be fiscally ridiculous for the city to try to, build an entire jail and have prosecutors and do all of these things. The state's attorney's office does that. That's their expertise. So even if we could, I'm sure we wouldn't.
So there was anybody have any questions on that? We could clarify a little further if necessary. On this one right here, and then I have one other question submitted, and then I'm going to open it up to the public for questions. Okay, so the other question was extremely long. It would have taken up probably about 5 or 6 slides to put just the question on there. It was more of a complaint regarding code enforcement and code enforcement issues and the fines. And with this person's complaint, the issue is that code enforcement's still going to be enforced. The fine structure is still the fine structure, and I'll rely on the attorney to correct me if I cross the wrong road here. But the state statutes already set the fines. The fine structure is there, and that's what our ordinance reflects, or what the state of Illinois allows us to fine, and it's a per-day fine. The maximum fine can be $750 per day for every day that violation exists. Now, there's some people who have had some significant fines from code enforcement related issues because a choice was made, and I don't know what the exact circumstances were on this issue, but getting rid of home rule is not going to change or have any impact on the enforcement or what that fine structure is. Is it something we may need to go back? Yeah, we had some discussion on that last night with a couple council members, and I think we will go back and take a look at our processes. So is it a process problem? I don't think it's an ordinance. I don't think it's a law problem. We're going to go back and look at the process. So that would be the quick answer to that. And I really, I mean, most of it was a complaint about the individual, so I'll leave that there. But at this time, I will open it up. Obviously, ma'am, you have a question. I would ask if anybody does have a question, please come up to the mic, because we are making a recording of this. It is being broadcast so that it can be heard and recorded, and we'll go from there. So if anybody has a question or they want to talk to us, we'll try our best. Please step up to the podium, and we'll take questions now. And just please state your name so we know.
Barbara Harlan.
Okay.
And in regards, I'm actually bringing forward some comments that have been made to me by other persons in the community, or I would say complaints, but I don't want to start off that way. Okay, council mentioned Rockford, Illinois. That's 147,049 persons as of 2024. And you said our population is what?
I didn't mention our population. You said our population is what?
Okay, but you said it went up by 20%.
I said their taxes.
Yeah.
Their taxes, so they repealed home rule. And then they were forced to go to a referendum to raise their taxes 7 times, their real estate taxes. So they put that burden back on the homeowners after they repealed their home rule. I didn't say anything about our population in comparison to their population. If that came out that way, I do apologize.
Okay, because it just seemed like it was a rather extreme kind of situation.
It is,
Huge
no, but it is an extreme
population.
population. 7 times they put the burden back on the homeowners.
Right. I want to say their property taxes, I want to say I read in one of the publications, 300% is what it increased. Because they lose all that tax base that home rule gives right now, the home rule tax, the hotel motel, there's percentages of that come from people from outside, so that spreads out the tax burden. And when you lose that, where do you recover that revenue from? So they put it back on the real estate taxes.
And if your point is, that's a really big city and Pekin's not really comparable to that, one of the reasons that we bring up, that particular city is there's only been, 4 or 5 cities that have successfully repealed home rule, in any kind of comparable time frame. So it's it comes out to referendum and almost always it's been defeated. So it's just been a handful of times, and Rockford just happens to be one of those select times when people have actually repealed it, and we can then see what the reaction is to their finances.
Okay,
And we do have, in the one slide, it shows what would help if we were to lose the $8 million that we collect right now on the various home rule taxes in place. If you have a $100,000 house, if it's 160% tax levy, on the left, it shows $716. That would be what the increase would be, I guess, approximately.
To replace the revenue.
To replace that revenue.
And for the record, so $8 million in scope, we are roughly, if you take out extraordinary things, the general fund, which is kind of what does most of the normal work of the city, is approximately $40 million. So you're talking 20 cents out of every dollar goes away. And a lot of those expenses in that 40 million are not something that we get to change. For instance, even if we eliminated half of the police department and half of the fire department, we still would reduce very small the pension payment, because the vast majority of our pension payment is to catch up from the prior years of underpaying into the pension.
can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely, please.
Okay, so the biggest amount of complaints that I've heard about the police department specifically is the military police presence now that is the money being spent towards that kind of SWAT teams and everything else. And they're questioning whether or not that's a realistic approach to our tiny town.
Can you give me examples of the military that they're purchasing here? Because,
The whole SWAT team kind of thing.
so the SWAT team that people are talking about in here are actually.
And one time
They're from the.
was used, one time is what,
No, they use them
was
here,
it was a bust on Court Street. was
well,
like some sort of
I
tire
could
shop
tell
or
you just from
something.
my own personal knowledge, being the former police chief, and the police chief keeps me apprised, they get used regularly, and it's CERT, it's the Central Illinois Emergency Response Team. It's not Pekin only. They respond in a regional, I think we're Region 7, and the police officer in here is nodding his head, so I think I'm correct. But they service all the communities here, and there's some bad actors in our communities, and that's what they're there for. And they do a lot more than the one that everybody's saying, and that money is not coming on our taxpayers. That's being paid through a lot of the state stuff. Now, there are budgeted items because there's training and everything else, and we do supply some equipment to them on our end, but there's not millions of dollars going to them for the SWAT teams. This is a regional response, and believe me, when it goes to crap on a bad day, you want those people to be there and available, because if they're not there, we're going to get overrun. And they're not going out, and it's not like what you're seeing in Chicago and the ICE stuff. This is legitimate. This is drug cartels. These are a lot of really bad actors in the neighborhood that require that type of response.
Okay, the other part of that would be that It's been said that there's very little transparency or communication when it comes to the prison out here, that there was some sort of upset, and that very little information was released about that, and that it's been considered that that would be a higher level risk facility, and no
Can you give me a
communication.
specific on what happened, or,
That's just it.
all right.
No.
So you have a federal prison, and we're Pekin, and even though they're located in Pekin, I cannot drive on them without them stopping me and wanting to search my car, and why am I there? It's the federal government.
It was an altercation of some sort. That's the
Yeah,
only
and I,
information that was
I
told.
don't know, we do not control them. We do meet with them. I can certainly bring that up, and I can bring up the fact that transparency is an issue that was voiced to us. But, you know, they are a prison. They don't put out some information because they house bad people. And I guess my answer is that's something that should be taken up with them, either by writing, I don't know if Darren LaHood or the congressman or somebody write them about that concern, but we meet with them on occasion, but we do not have any say over how they operate or what they put out or don't put out.
And on to the prison,
okay.
real quick, if we're non-home rule, doesn't affect our relationship with the federal government in any way that I can think of. And the, major interaction that we do have with the prison is we do provide sewer services for them, and they are like 10% of our sewer customer. I mean, that's 10% of our revenue through that. So we actually are a contractor of them, where we actually provide that service. But as the, the manager said, like, they are completely in charge of what's going on in their footprint, other than, so we take their outflow of excrement.
Okay, so out of the $8 million, could that be redistributed as to what receives those funds, as in the park takes up a huge chunk, and people seem to be upset that, well, we're not living in the park, we're living in our homes.
Yeah, so the park district, totally not part of this equation at all. So the
Okay.
parks, we control a couple little pocket parks downtown, very small little things, but the park district that is on your tax bill, et cetera, completely separate form of government, unaffected by this conversation. Anything that's done in this room does not affect them. We deal with them occasionally from an intergovernmental standpoint. We will cooperate on some things, but there is nothing, like, they have their own budget, they have their own taxes, and the two don't play together.
Okay, so just in what you said, and if people listen to this recording, however it's being
Yeah.
presented, and whenever, that gives them an explanation of which no one has had before.
Yeah, and I will say, it's one of my mantras, that Illinois makes government confusing, I think, just to keep the common person confused. And I mean, it's horrible. I mean, we have more local governments than any other state in the country by a factor of 40%. I mean, we just have that many local governments. And that, our park district is separate. Now, the library is part of us, so that is actually ultimately under our umbrella, though they do have a separate board, and the city council does defer to them on a lot of their operational issues, but ultimately that is part of this. But the park district is separate, Pekin Township is separate, school districts are separate. So there's a lot of other layers that have there, but we have to stay in our lane. That's actually one of the things I think the local government can get in trouble for, is trying to tell other governments what to do when that's not our mandate. But it's a great question, because honestly, we can never educate enough when it comes to how complicated they've made government in Illinois.
Okay. About code, a lot of people, including myself, are extremely upset about code and trying to get an answer out of them. A fair answer and not being spoken down to.
Okay.
Yeah, John, I think we've talked about having a town hall specifically about code enforcement.
enforcement,
Because
right.
again, that's, whether we're home rule or not, there's gonna be code enforcement in some aspect, as long as city council keeps, wanting it. So, I think a whole separate town hall on that is one of the things we're gonna schedule.
Okay, yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take one vote yes to that.
on a meeting. And thank you for your answers.
Thank you.
Right. Nobody else has questions? Matt?
Yeah, Matthew Johnson. It's great information in the slide deck. I really appreciate the callback to the Constitution, because quite frankly, I mean, it's all right there in Section 6 of what home rule is. I want to question the referendum process in its own right. Section 6, 6B specifically says a home rule unit by referendum may elect not to be a home rule unit, period. The key word there is may. Just because we have a referendum on the ballot, hypothetically, if it's 60-40 in favor to eliminate it, the elected officials, you could throw it on the ballot, or not the ballot, but an agenda, but the elected officials don't have to vote it through, correct?
Are you talking about what happened here before?
No, I'm just hypothetically asking a question, I guess.
So I'm just trying to understand, are you talking about a referendum, if the referendum's out?
If the referendum is
Yeah.
out and it comes back a 60-40 favor to
Yeah.
eliminate home rule, the referendum just tells you that you can put it on the agenda as an action item for the council to approve, right?
I mean, I've always thought it was binding, but we'll do a research memorandum on it. We'll have it for you, Madam Mayor. Yeah.
He said the word may is what.
It specifically says may, it does not say shall.
Right, but what you're reading and what you read was that they have the right to do that they have the right to go to referendum,
Okay.
right? I mean, if you read through it again, right, and that says that you have the right to go to referendum.
And that's,
Yeah, that's not how I read that.
Yeah, and I will say this, at least from a historical perspective, I've never heard, and Jim, you can correct me, I've never heard of a non-binding home rule, an advisory home rule referendum, right? It is, at least all the examples I've ever seen, it was like that settled the issue. It didn't have a follow-up
Right.
vote by the city council or anything like that.
Yeah, and we'll, again, Madam Mayor, you'll have a memorandum for it in,
All right,
what are we, 2 weeks?
Yeah.
2 weeks minus a day, Mr. Johnson.
okay.
Minus 2
I
days.
feel you know how to get a hold of me. I mean, I can fill this out if you'd like.
you're on speed dial.
I would like to caution the city. It's nice to do a callback to the 1987 vote, but I'm just gonna be perfectly honest, I was 9 years old back then. I didn't vote. There's a lot of members in the community who couldn't have voted, so when you call back to a 38-year-old vote, voter turnover is an actual metric in the voting process or election process. So, because obviously it's morbid, registered voters pass away, new voters turn 18 and whatnot. So I would challenge, it's great to see it, but I would challenge or caution the use of callback there to a 38-year-old. And I guess just a couple real quick follow-up questions. You talked about taxes, right? Taxes are just an unnecessary burden to us, and they're not controlled by home rule. I get that. In Illinois, of course, it's got some of the highest taxes in the nation. But it's really, to me and other members of the community, it's about a cost of living. We pay incredible amount of fees. This 5% utility tax that was passed last year, we didn't have to pay that ever before. And by a vote of 4-3, boom, there it is. And most taxes, if you look at it, the grocery tax is 1%. The physical home rule tax is 1.75. We launched it to 5%.
What'd we launch to 5%?
The utility tax. You could have just made it like 1% in line with all these others.
An interesting sort of global perspective. First, if I could say about, yes, I understand hearkening back to 1987, nobody's, that's a relevant point. The Constitution's 250 years old, and we're not revoting on that either. Nobody was around to do that one. But on the grocery tax, the utility tax, those are things that, again, if the slide pointed out, is irrelevant to home rule. They actually, when they did the whole repeal of grocery tax down in Springfield, one of the things they purposely did was they said it's not home rule related, that non-home rule cities, municipalities can put the grocery tax back on. So that's not related to home rule. The utility tax also was passed not under home rule powers. And the overarching, I would say, since I was here during the time of passing the utility tax, as well as the rate increases that were passed in that same time frame, the utility tax was done because this community has for decades neglected investing in their infrastructure. Now, you can question choices that have been made, that they should have not spent on other things, that they should have spent on that infrastructure because of other issues. And that's, everybody's prerogative to second guess what happened in the past. And it's how we learn. So that's a very, effective thing to do. But absent that 5% utility tax, we would be running a large deficit, or we'd have to be cutting a whole bunch of spending. And this is I think it might be my last point here. We are constantly looking at what can we cut. I mean, it is not something that we just wait for budget time, or we just wait till there's a public comment, or that there's a FOIA that alerts to us. I mean, it is a constant thing, like, oh, do we need that person sitting in that office? Do we need to, can we do that vendor better? Can we redo the way we plow the streets? And I mean, that's a constant thing. And so we can always get better, but there's not this magic bullet, $8 million or several $1 million for the utility tax replacement that's just like, all we have to do is just get rid of the firework display that costs us $8 million every 4th of July, and that's optional. So it's not, and we're welcome to constantly take those suggestions, because we look at them all the time.
I just think on the utility tax, Matt, part of the issue with the utility tax and why that had to come in is we had the CSO project and the EPA on that. That was supposed to be done years ago.
Yeah, that's sewer fund, John.
But the utility tax was part of the.
That was unrelated.
No,
The sewer fee increase had to do with the CSO.
That and the utility tax, though, was part of what they looked at when we went in for the loan on it, because, it's a $22 million project, and we had to be able to show for that low interest loan from the EPA that we had done everything to bring those funds back in line with where they needed to be. That's part of what all of that was. And we actually were at the IML conference, and we happened to go in there right after we applied for the loan, and they said, if you have not done these things, you're not going to get the loans for that. So that we really didn't have a choice at that time. The EPA was breathing down our neck. We were in violation, and we stood to be fined on a daily basis of, I forget how many tens of thousands of dollars per day and it was going to go back in years. So
I mean,
it was going to cost us more to pay the fine than what it is going to cost us to do the CSO project. That's an EPA mandate.
and Mr. Johnson, it's perfectly reasonable to question whether a tax should be passed or not on its merits.
It's a fee.
Sure, tax fee, and all of the above. I think the only point we were making tonight is that did not have anything to do with home rule authority. Like, we're not up here saying that it was necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. Our professional opinions were something council considered, but the point is, it had nothing to do with home rule authority.
But under home rule, you can raise it next week.
But under the utility tax?
Mm-hmm.
No, the utility tax is set by state law on the maximum amounts that you're allowed to charge.
So what's the max?
It's 5% on natural gas, 5% on water, and then there's a whole table based on kilowatt hour for electric.
And home rule does not preempt that, to my knowledge. Like, there's no home rule we get to go to 20% or anything like that I'm aware of.
And I think I know you like to do your research, which is great, and I'm commending you for that. I just think part of the overall thing is, the overall message we're trying to convey is, a lot of these things that people are telling you or other people that are based on home rule, they just aren't. They just aren't. We have and we operate essentially in a manner that is very conservative compared to other home rule units with regards to what we do in reality. And I understand that there's information out there, but I just think, like the gentleman around me were saying, for example, I think the TIF district has nothing to do with home rule. These things are they're just different types of things. And I know you like to do your research, and I would invite you to do that. You could find out for yourself. But a lot of these things that are being brought up, like the nice young lady said earlier today, the idea is you think code has to do with home rule, but it doesn't. It's a code thing. It's a separate thing. We're going to address that separately. But these are just not home rule issues. They're just not related to it.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else?
If it doesn't apply to home rule, or if you don't know if it applies to home rule or not?
Ask away, we'll tell you whether it does.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we may have to go look it up ourselves.
Okay,
We
next
may need to
complaint.
research it. We may need, that's my one request, that if we don't know, we'll research it.
Okay,
We'll be
next
back.
question. The huge complaint, it's great to have all the new stores and stuff coming into town. However, did anyone ever state that those properties need to put up solar or anything that would help compensate the extra usage of energy that is going to drive our homeowners' rates up?
Okay, I think I understand your question. So plainly, the answer is no. We don't have, beyond the Illinois Conservation Code, Energy Conservation Code, we do not require solar panels or particular energy efficiency things. I will say the Illinois Energy Conservation Code is very strict and getting stricter. It's one of the things driving up the cost of building a new house.
So home rule doesn't allow us to stipulate that they need to do something on their own?
Let me rephrase.
Okay,
A city, home rule or not, can adopt its own building codes. That is something we could do, but it would not require home rule authority. So even if we were non-home rule, we still theoretically could require solar panels. I don't know that that's something council wants to do, but either way, home rule, non-home rule, a city can adopt its building codes.
And in any incentive agreement, we could put conditions on there with regards to energy use. We could say if you are entering into development agreement for the construction of anything, that you have to do X, Y, and Z within reason, of course.
yeah, to offset the
Sure,
homeowners' costs.
sure, and that could be something that gets brought up and negotiated, but again, you asked a very good question. Does this have to do with home rule? Absolutely not.
Okay, so, okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Any council or the mayor have anything they'd like to say?
That's dangerous.
Is that dangerous? Yeah. Yeah, okay, I guess not. Any staff? Yeah, so I do tentatively, we have put out, we're gonna do some more town halls, December 10th, I'm looking at right now, tentative. I wanna make sure, I'm gonna have staff here as we start hitting the holidays. Some like to throw in their last minute vacation requests on me. Want to make sure people are available for that, but I do anticipate December 10th as the next one. And being with the turnout tonight, if there's anybody that's watching and you have questions or questions came up on that post, was the email of Paige. Please email those questions, and we will try to address those at the next meeting or beforehand if we get the opportunity. And then we'll put something out as soon as we're ready for the next one. So thanks, everybody, for coming tonight. Appreciate the time. And if you think of something, that email's out there. I will get my email out, and you can email your questions in, and we'll get them answered. But thanks for your time. Oh, yeah.